After 20 years of saving, planning, and dreaming, I had finally done it. I had purchased my forever home, a modest but beautiful three-bedroom house with large windows that overlooked Silver Pines Lake. The water was visible from my living room, kitchen, and master bedroom, sparkling in the sunlight during the day and reflecting the moon at night. A wooden trail wound around the lake, passing directly behind my property. The previous owners had installed a simple chain-link fence around the backyard, but I had immediately upgraded to a proper wooden privacy fence with a gate that opened toward the trail. The first week in my new home felt like paradise. I spent every evening sitting on my back porch, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of orange and pink. My golden retriever, Max, would lie at my feet, occasionally lifting his head to watch birds or small animals scurry across the property. This was exactly what I had worked so hard for: tranquility, nature, and a space to call my own. My immediate neighbors seemed friendly enough. On my left lived an elderly couple who had been in the neighborhood for over 30 years. They brought me a homemade apple pie as a welcome gift and told me stories about how the area had changed over the decades. On my right was a young family with two small children who waved enthusiastically whenever they saw me outside. I felt welcomed and at ease in my new community. That sense of peace lasted exactly 9 days. On the morning of the 10th day, as I was planting flowers along my front walkway, a silver Mercedes pulled into my driveway. A woman who appeared to be in her mid-50s stepped out, wearing an expensive-looking pantsuit and heels that seemed impractical for the gravel driveway. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her smile did not reach her eyes. She approached me with an extended hand. "Welcome to Silver Pines Lake Community," she said, her voice clipped and professional. "I am Carla Richardson, president of the Homeowners Association. I wanted to personally welcome you to our neighborhood." I wiped my soul-covered hands on my jeans before shaking hers. "Thank you. I have been loving it here so far. Everyone has been very kind." Carla nodded, but her eyes were already scanning my property with the intensity of a building inspector. "I see you have made some changes already. The fence is new, correct? And you added a gate to the lake trail." "Yes," I replied, feeling oddly defensive. The previous fence was falling apart and I wanted something more secure for my dog. Plus, I appreciate the privacy. Her eyebrows raised slightly. "I noticed the gate has a lock on it." "Yes, it does," I confirmed. "As I said, I have a dog and I want to make sure he is safe when we are not home. Plus, I prefer to control access to my property." Carla's smile tightened. "We typically allow access to the lake trail through all lakefront properties. It is part of the community spirit here at Silver Pines." "I was not informed of that during the purchase," I said calmly, "and I have not seen anything about it in the HOA documents I received." "It is more of a tradition," she replied, her tone cooling noticeably. "Something neighbors do for one another." I stood up straight, brushing dirt from my knees. "I understand community spirit, but I do value my privacy and security. The gate stays locked when I am not home or using it." Carla's face tightened for a moment before she forced another smile. "Well, we will have to discuss this further. In the meantime, please familiarize yourself with the HOA bylaws. We take them very seriously here." As she walked back to her car, I could not shake the feeling that I had just made an enemy. Something about her demeanor and the way she had looked at my gate suggested this conversation was far from over. I watched her drive away, a sense of unease replacing the peace I had felt just moments earlier. I should have trusted my instincts that day. That look in her eyes was not simple curiosity. It was the gaze of someone who felt entitled to control everything around her, including my property. 2 weeks later, I heard a firm knock at my front door. When I opened it, Carla stood there with another woman I had not met before. This time, Carla was not smiling at all. In her hand was an official-looking envelope with the HOA logo embossed on it. "Good afternoon," she said, her tone businesslike. "This is Sandra, our HOA secretary. We are here on official HOA business." I invited them in, mostly out of politeness, though every instinct told me to shut the door. We sat in my living room, the large windows showcasing the beautiful lake view that had sold me on the house in the first place. Carla wasted no time on pleasantries. "We are here to discuss the matter of your backyard gate," she announced, handing me the envelope. "Inside you will find a formal request from the HOA board requiring you to provide a spare key to your gate lock." I stared at her in disbelief before opening the envelope. The letter inside was typed on official letterhead, stating that as a lakefront property owner, I was required to provide reasonable access to the lake trail through my property, including a spare key to any locks that might impede such access. "This cannot be serious," I said, looking up from the paper. "You want a key to my private gate, so strangers can walk through my yard whenever they please." "Not strangers," Sandra interjected, sounding offended. "Your neighbors, community members, people who have lived here much longer than you have." Carla nodded in agreement. "It is customary. All lakefront property owners provide access. The trail is for everyone." I set the letter down on my coffee table. I was never informed of this during the purchase. My realtor never mentioned it, and I have read through all the HOA documents. There is no easement or right-of way listed for my property. "It is an understood custom," Carla repeated, her voice hardening. "One that has been respected by all homeowners before you." "I am sorry, but I am not comfortable giving out keys to my property," I stated firmly. "The gate leads directly to my backyard. This is a privacy and security issue." "You are being rather difficult about this," Carla said, her lips pursing. "The previous owners never had a problem with access." "The previous owners did not have a proper fence or gate," I pointed out. "And according to county records, this is private property with no easements." Sandra leaned forward. "You do understand that as a member of the HOA, you are expected to comply with board requests." "I understand that I am expected to comply with the actual bylaws," I replied, "which I have read thoroughly. Nothing in them states I must give anyone access to my private property." Carla stood up abruptly. "We will have to take this to the full board. I must say, this is not a good way to start your relationship with the community." "I want to be a good neighbor," I assured her, standing as well, "but not at the expense of my privacy and security. I am not giving anyone a key to my gate." As they left, I heard Carla mutter under her breath, "Noncompliance will be noted." I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, my heart racing. I had just moved in. I had not even finished unpacking all my boxes, and already I was in a conflict with the HOA. But something about their demand felt wrong, invasive and controlling. I looked out my window at the lake, the very view I had fallen in love with, and wondered if it was worth the battle that was clearly brewing. In that moment, though, I knew I would not back down. Not over a key. Not over my right to privacy in my own home. 3 days after refusing to provide a key, I found a bright yellow notice taped to my front door. "Violation. Improper waste disposal," it read in bold letters. According to the notice, my trash can had been placed at the curb at 5:30 p.m. the previous evening, when HOA rules stipulated no earlier than 6:00 p.m. the night before collection. I knew this was false. I had specifically checked the time before taking out my trash, and it had been 6:15 p.m. This was clearly retaliation, but I decided not to engage. I removed the notice, filed it away, and continued with my day. The following week brought two more violation notices, one for excessive lawn growth, though my grass was freshly cut, and another for unapproved exterior lighting, referring to a small solar garden light I had installed along my front walkway. Each violation came with a fine, starting at $50 and increasing with each subsequent notice. I began documenting everything. I took daily photos of my lawn, my trash placement, and anything else that could possibly be twisted into a violation. I started a detailed log of every interaction with the HOA. Something told me I would need this evidence. One evening, as Max and I were enjoying the sunset from the backyard, I noticed movement near my fence line. Peering through the slats was Carla, accompanied by two men I did not recognize. They were clearly examining my property, pointing at various features and taking notes. Max barked loudly, startling them. "Can I help you?" I called out, walking toward the fence. Carla straightened up, not the least bit embarrassed at being caught. "We are conducting a routine property inspection. Your dog seems quite aggressive." "My dog is protecting his property," I replied. "As am I. Please do not peer through my fence. If you need to inspect something, I would appreciate advance notice." The HOA bylaws permit inspection of visible areas from common spaces. One of the men stated, pointing to a clipboard, "We are within our rights." The inside of my fenced yard is not a visible area from common spaces, unless you are deliberately trying to look through the slats, I pointed out. That feels like an invasion of privacy. The next morning, another violation notice appeared, this time for housing a potentially dangerous animal. The notice cited Max's aggressive behavior and excessive barking as creating a hostile environment for neighbors accessing the lake trail. This was the final straw. I decided to attend the next HOA meeting to address these issues directly. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a small building near the entrance to the neighborhood. I arrived early, armed with my documentation and determination. The meeting room was filled with about 30 residents, most of whom I had never met. Carla sat at the head table with Sandra and 3 other board members. When the meeting reached the open forum portion, I raised my hand to speak. "My name is Naim," I began. "I recently moved into the lakefront property at 1423 Pine Ridge Drive. Since refusing to provide a key to my backyard gate, I have received numerous violation notices that appear to be retaliatory in nature. I would like to address these issues." Before I could continue, Carla interrupted. "All violations are documented and verified by at least 2 board members. If you wish to contest specific violations, you need to submit a formal appeal in writing." "I have photographs proving these violations are fabricated," I said, holding up my phone. "My lawn has been maintained well below the 4-inch maximum height. My trash was not placed out early, and my dog is not aggressive. He was protecting our property from people peering through the fence." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement, but most looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact. "We have photographic evidence as well," Sandra claimed, though she showed nothing, "and multiple witness statements." "I would like to see that evidence," I requested. "It is available for review by appointment," Carla stated dismissively. "Now, if there are no other issues to discuss." "I have not finished," I insisted. "I want to address the key demand. There is nothing in the bylaws requiring me to provide access through my property." Carla's face hardened. The board interprets the bylaws, and we have determined that reasonable lake access is covered under Section 7 regarding common area usage. My backyard is not a common area, I stated firmly. Laughter rippled through the room, not from humor but from discomfort and, I suspected, fear. These people had lived under Carla's reign for years. They were accustomed to compliance. "Thank you for your input," Carla said, effectively dismissing me. "Next item on the agenda." I left the meeting feeling frustrated but more resolved than ever. The message was clear. I was the outsider. They were the established order. My voice, my rights, did not matter to them. But the war had just begun, and I was not about to surrender. I had been at work all day, a particularly stressful Tuesday that had left me exhausted. All I wanted was to get home, take Max for a walk, and relax with a glass of wine on my porch. But the moment I stepped into my backyard, I knew something was wrong. The gate in my fence, my locked gate, was ajar. The padlock hung awkwardly, bent and broken. I froze, immediately scanning the yard for intruders, but it seemed empty. Max ran to the gate, sniffing frantically and growling low in his throat. "Stay, Max," I commanded, my heart racing as I slowly approached the damaged lock. The metal was twisted, as if someone had tried to force it open with a tool. When I looked closer, I noticed muddy footprints leading from the gate across my lawn toward the house, then back to the gate again. Someone had been in my yard, walking around, examining my property. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and opened the security camera app. I had installed cameras after the harassment began, including one with a view of the gate. I scrolled through the afternoon footage and stopped when I saw movement at approximately 2:15 p.m. The video quality was not perfect, but it clearly showed a man in a blue shirt with what looked like an HOA logo approaching my gate. He examined the lock, then pulled out something from his pocket, a tool of some kind. The footage showed him struggling with the lock for several minutes before it finally gave way. He entered my yard, walked around for about 10 minutes, then left through the gate, leaving it slightly open. White-hot anger surged through me. This was not just harassment anymore, this was breaking and entering. This was criminal. I called Carla immediately, not bothering to hide my anger. "Someone from the HOA broke my gate lock today," I said the moment she answered. "I have it on video. Blue shirt, HOA logo. Who was it?" There was a pause before Carla responded, her voice calm and dismissive. "I have no idea what you are talking about. None of our maintenance personnel reported any issues with your property today." "Do not lie to me," I snapped. "I have video evidence of someone in an HOA shirt breaking my lock and entering my property without permission." "Perhaps you should check your cameras again," Carla suggested coolly. "Or perhaps you damaged the lock yourself to make accusations against us. That would be a serious matter." I was momentarily stunned into silence. "Are you actually suggesting I broke my own lock?" "It would not be the first time a homeowner has gone to extreme lengths to avoid compliance," she replied. "If you have concerns about trespassing, you should contact the police, though I doubt they will find any evidence of wrongdoing on our part." She hung up before I could respond. I stood there, phone in hand, utterly furious and in disbelief. She had not even tried to deny it. She had simply turned it around on me, accusing me of staging the entire thing. I called the non-emergency police line and explained the situation. The officer who answered was sympathetic but not particularly helpful. "Without a clear identification of the individual, this would be difficult to pursue criminally," he explained. "And since there does not appear to be any theft or property damage beyond the lock, it would likely be considered a civil matter between you and the HOA. So they can just break into my property and there are no consequences? I asked incredulously. I did not say that, the officer clarified. You can file a report, which I recommend you do. Document everything. If the harassment continues or escalates, that builds your case. But right now, with just a broken lock and unclear footage, it would be your word against theirs. After filing the police report, I drove to the hardware store and purchased the strongest padlock they had, along with motion-activated floodlights for the backyard. I installed everything that evening, along with 2 additional security cameras with improved resolution. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump, wondering if someone was trying to access my property again. The violation had left me feeling vulnerable in my own home, the home I had worked so hard to obtain, the home that was supposed to be my sanctuary. But beneath the anxiety was a growing determination. They had crossed a line. This was no longer about a key or community access. This was about the right to feel safe in my own home, and I was not going to back down. Not now, not ever. The morning after the break-in, I called in sick to work. I needed time to think, to plan, to fight back. This had gone far beyond petty HOA politics. I was being targeted, harassed, and now my property had been violated. It was time to take action. My first step was to thoroughly research the HOA bylaws again. I printed out all 73 pages and went through them line by line, making notes, highlighting relevant sections, and looking for anything related to lake access, easements, or right-of-way provisions. After hours of careful reading, I confirmed what I had suspected. There was absolutely nothing in the bylaws that required homeowners to provide access through their property to the lake trail. Section 7, which Carla had referenced in the meeting, only stated that all community members shall have equal access to designated common areas, including the lake and surrounding trail system. My backyard was not a designated common area. The trail that ran behind my property was accessible from both ends without needing to cut through anyone's yard. Armed with this knowledge, I contacted a real estate attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. The consultation fee was steep, but I considered it an investment in my peace of mind. I brought all my documentation, the violation notices, photographs, video footage, and highlighted bylaws. The attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Rebecca, reviewed everything carefully. They have no legal right to demand access through your property, she confirmed. There is no easement registered with the county, nothing in the bylaws, and no reasonable expectation of access. What they are doing constitutes harassment, and the break-in could potentially be pursued as criminal trespassing. What should I do? I asked. We start with a formal cease and desist letter, she replied. I will outline the harassment to date, clarify the legal boundaries of your property, and demand that all retaliatory actions stop immediately. I will also request that they rescind all violation notices and associated fines, as they appear to be issued in bad faith. The letter was sent by certified mail the next day, ensuring that the HOA board could not deny receiving it. It was professional but firm, ending with a clear statement that further harassment would result in legal action, including but not limited to civil suits for harassment and potential criminal charges for trespassing. While waiting for their response, I took additional steps to secure my property. I posted a large sign on my gate, "Private property, no access. TRESPASSERS will be PROSECUTED." It was not the most neighborly decoration, but it served its purpose, establishing a clear boundary. 3 days after posting the sign, another violation notice appeared on my door. This one cited inappropriate signage and creating a hostile community environment. The fine was $250. I photographed the notice, sent it to Rebecca, and added it to my growing file of evidence. She advised me to ignore it and not pay the fine, as we had already issued the cease and desist. Any further violations would simply strengthen our case. A week passed with no official response from the HOA board to our legal letter. The violation notices stopped temporarily, but I often spotted Carla driving slowly past my house or walking along the lake trail behind my property, studying my fence and gate. I made sure to wave when I saw her, letting her know I was aware of her surveillance. During this time, I began preparing for the possibility of taking the matter to small claims court. I organized all my evidence chronologically, calculated the costs I had incurred due to their harassment, including the new lock, security cameras, and legal fees, and rehearsed my statement with Rebecca. "They are hoping you will give up," Rebecca told me during one of our meetings. "Most people do. Fighting an HOA is expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally draining. They count on that. But you have something many others do not: clear documentation of systematic harassment and a solid legal foundation for your position." I nodded, feeling both exhausted and determined. I am not giving up. This is my home. I have the right to feel safe here. As we continued to prepare our case, I became increasingly aware that this battle was about more than just a gate or a key. It was about power and control. It was about standing up to bullies who had likely been getting their way for years. And most importantly, it was about establishing that even within an HOA community, there are limits to what can be demanded of homeowners. The fight was far from over, but for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt like I had a fighting chance. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon, almost 2 weeks after the cease and desist letter had been sent. I was in my backyard, planting new flowers along the fence line, with Max lounging in the sun nearby. The peaceful moment was shattered by the sound of voices approaching from the lake trail. "This is the property," I heard a male voice say. "The one with the non-compliant gate." I stood up, brushing dirt from my knees, and approached my gate. Through the slats, I could see Carla standing with 2 men. One I recognized from the HOA meeting, the other unfamiliar to me. All 3 wore expressions of determination. "Can I help you?" I called out, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Carla stepped forward. "We need to discuss your continued noncompliance with HOA regulations." "We have already communicated through my attorney," I replied. "If you have a response, please direct it to her office." "This matter requires immediate attention," the unfamiliar man stated. He held up a folder. "We have documentation here that you need to review and sign." Curiosity got the better of me. I approached the gate but did not unlock it. "What documentation?" "The board has voted to update the bylaws regarding lake access," Carla announced, her voice carrying a note of triumph. "Section 7 has been clarified to specifically include access through lakefront properties, where the trail runs adjacent to private property lines. This change is effective immediately." "You cannot retroactively change bylaws to target a specific homeowner," I said, remembering what Rebecca had told me. "And any changes require a proper voting process with notification to all homeowners." "The vote was conducted at last night's emergency session," the familiar man explained. "As HOA president, Carla has the authority to implement emergency measures when necessary for the community good." I shook my head. I never received notification of an emergency session, and I do not believe this qualifies as an emergency by any reasonable standard. "Open the gate," Carla demanded. "We need to assess the trail access point from your property as part of the implementation process." "No," I said firmly. "I will not open the gate. Please leave my property." The unfamiliar man stepped forward and placed his hand on the gate latch. "This is no longer a request. As representatives of the HOA, we have the right to inspect areas affected by bylaw changes." "Remove your hand from my gate," I said, my voice low but clear. "You are trespassing on private property." Instead of complying, he began to push against the gate, testing its strength. Max started barking ferociously, sensing the tension. "Control your animal," Carla snapped. "This aggressive behavior is exactly why we need access controls in place." I pulled out my phone and began recording. "I am asking you all to leave my property now. This is the final warning before I call the police." "Go ahead," Carla challenged. "They will simply confirm our right to access." The man continued to push against the gate, which thankfully held firm with its new reinforced lock. His actions were clearly visible in my recording. I dialed 911 with my other hand. "I need to report trespassers attempting to force entry onto my property," I told the dispatcher, my voice surprisingly calm. I gave my address and a brief description of the situation. "Officers are on their way," the dispatcher assured me. "Please try to maintain a safe distance from the individuals." I backed away from the gate, keeping my phone recording. Max stayed by my side, still barking intermittently. The three HOA representatives remained at the gate, speaking amongst themselves in hushed tones. They seemed confident the police would side with them. Less than 10 minutes later, 2 police cruisers pulled up in front of my house. 3 officers made their way around to the back, where I met them at the side of the house. I was still recording everything. "What seems to be the problem here?" the lead officer asked, looking between me and the 3 people standing outside my gate. "These individuals are attempting to force entry onto my private property," I explained, gesturing toward the gate. "I have asked them repeatedly to leave. They claim to represent the HOA and say they have the right to enter my yard without permission." Carla stepped forward. "Officer, we are the duly elected representatives of the Silver Pines Lake Homeowners Association. We are conducting official business regarding community lake access." The officer turned to me. "Do you mind if I take a look at your gate?" I led him to the gate, where the other 2 HOA representatives still stood. The officer examined the lock, which showed fresh scratch marks from their attempts to force it. "Do you have documentation regarding your right to access this property?" the officer asked Carla. She handed him the folder she had been holding. "These are the updated bylaws, approved last night, specifically addressing lake access through lakefront properties." The officer glanced at the papers, then at me. "Do you have any documentation regarding your property rights?" I nodded and pulled out my phone. "I have the cease and desist letter my attorney sent to the HOA board 2 weeks ago, specifically addressing this issue. I also have video footage of these individuals attempting to force entry today, as well as footage from 2 weeks ago when someone broke my previous lock." I showed him the videos and forwarded copies of the legal documents to his email address. The officer reviewed everything carefully before addressing all parties. "Here is how this is going to work," he stated firmly. "This is a private property dispute. Based on the documentation I have seen, there is no clear legal easement established for access through this property. The homeowner has expressed that they do not grant permission for entry. Therefore, attempting to force entry constitutes trespassing." Carla's face flushed with anger. "But the bylaws." "Ma'am," the officer interrupted. HOA bylaws do not override property law. If you believe you have a legal right to access, you need to pursue that through proper legal channels, not by attempting to force entry. He turned to the man who had been pushing on the gate. I need to see some identification, sir. The man produced his driver's license reluctantly. Mr. Taylor, consider this an official warning. If you attempt to access this property again without the owner's permission or a court order, you will be charged with trespassing. Is that clear? The man nodded silently. His earlier confidence evaporated. The officer addressed Carla next. The same applies to you and anyone else representing the HOA. This is a civil matter that needs to be resolved through proper legal channels. If there are further attempts to access this property without permission, charges will be filed. Carla's face had turned from red to ashen. For the first time since I had met her, she seemed at a loss for words. Now, the officer continued, I suggest you all leave the premises immediately. The 3 HOA representatives retreated down the lake trail without another word. The flashing blue lights from the police cruisers reflected off the water, creating an almost surreal scene. I thanked the officers for their assistance. Document everything, the lead officer advised me before leaving. If they continue to harass you, do not hesitate to call us again. As the police departed, I stood by my gate, watching the 3 figures disappear around the bend of the trail. The confrontation had been intense, but for the first time in months, I felt a sense of vindication. The authorities had confirmed what I had known all along. This was my property, and no one had the right to demand access to it without my permission. The battle was not over yet, but a significant victory had been won, and Carla knew it. In the days following the police confrontation, an unusual quiet settled over my property. The violation notices stopped. The drive-by inspection ceased. Even the suspicious figures along the lake trail disappeared. It was as if the HOA had suddenly forgotten my existence, and it was glorious. I received a formal letter from the HOA board a week later, not through Carla but signed by the vice president. It stated simply that all previously issued violations against my property had been reviewed and dismissed, and that all associated fines had been waived. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, but the message was clear. They were backing down. Rebecca advised me to accept this implicit surrender, but to remain vigilant. They are cutting their losses, she explained. They know they would lose in court, and they are trying to avoid the public embarrassment and potential legal consequences of continuing this fight. Life began to return to normal. I could enjoy my backyard again without feeling watched. Max could bark at squirrels without being labeled a menace. I even started waving to neighbors walking along the lake trail, most of whom waved back with friendly smiles. It seemed many of them had never supported Carla's crusade against me, but had been too intimidated to speak up. During this period of peace, I decided to share my experience online in a neighborhood forum. I detailed the harassment, the invasion of privacy, the attempted break-ins, and finally, the police intervention. I was careful to stick to the facts and avoid inflammatory language, but the story spoke for itself. The response was overwhelming. Within days, my inbox filled with messages from other homeowners in Silver Pines and even neighboring communities. They shared their own stories of HOA overreach, retaliatory fines, and intimidation. One woman wrote that she had been fined for planting unauthorized flowers in her garden, wildflowers native to the area. Another described being threatened with legal action for having a basketball hoop in his driveway, despite nothing in the bylaws prohibiting it. A pattern emerged from these stories. Carla and her inner circle had been ruling the neighborhood with an iron fist for years, interpreting bylaws as they saw fit and targeting anyone who questioned their authority. My stand had emboldened others to speak out. A small group began meeting at my home to discuss ways to improve the HOA governance. We reviewed the bylaws thoroughly and found numerous instances where the current board had exceeded their authority. We formed a coalition and began planning for the next board elections, which were only 2 months away. Word of our meetings must have reached Carla. Neighbors reported that she was furious, denouncing us as troublemakers and non-compliant elements. But her influence was waning. More and more residents began to openly question board decisions and demand transparency at meetings. 3 weeks before the scheduled election, an emergency announcement was sent to all homeowners. Carla had resigned as HOA president, effective immediately, citing personal reasons and a desire to focus on family matters. The vice president would serve as interim president until the elections. No one believed the official explanation. Everyone knew she had stepped down to avoid the humiliation of losing the election, which had essentially become a referendum on her leadership. The news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire, with many residents expressing relief and hope for positive change. The election month arrived, and our coalition put forward a slate of candidates committed to fair enforcement of the bylaws, transparent decision-making, and respectful treatment of all homeowners. The turnout was the highest in the HOA's history, and our candidates won by overwhelming margins. In their first official meeting, the new board voted to clarify several ambiguous bylaws, including an explicit statement that no homeowner shall be required to provide access through their private property to common areas when alternative access points exist. It was a direct acknowledgement of the injustice I had faced and a safeguard against similar abuses in the future. 6 months after my confrontation with Carla and the police, I sat on my back porch, watching the sunset over the lake. Max lay at my feet, occasionally lifting his head to follow the movement of birds across the water. The gate in my fence remained locked, a symbol of the boundaries I had fought to protect. I had not seen Carla since her resignation. Rumors suggested she had moved to a different neighborhood, perhaps one without an HOA. I felt no animosity toward her anymore, just gratitude for the unexpected gift her tyranny had given me, a stronger community and a deeper appreciation for my home.